And just to begin with, just to explore the Rolling Stones' motivation for putting on Altamont in the first place. Now, the Rolling Stones had basically just done this big American tour, and they'd just pissed people off. Certainly a lot of people that they might have respected or they might have wanted the respect of. And they'd piss people off because they ripped people off. They overcharged on their tickets. They behaved like divas. They'd be like late on stage 2 hours. And they kind of got a lot of flack for it. Especially, you have to remember, this is 1969. This is at the sort of kind of the peak of that whole scene. And they kind of wanted to rebrand a little bit by throwing this free concert. However, because it's the Rolling Stones, and you have to realise this about the Rolling Stones, the main imperative behind the Rolling Stones, certainly beyond any sort of slightly esoteric social engineering agenda, which is there in the background, absolutely. But beyond that, it's just all about money. It's always been a commercial money-making machine. And, they were just scumbags. They'd like stay in hotels and then they'd run out and they wouldn't pay the bill. They'd like hire cars on tabs and they wouldn't pay the bills. They're just a scummy organisation. They really were. And, they had an eye on making a few quid out of this concert. It wasn't a case of, we'll just put on a free show and we'll just do this for the people. They had an eye on the film rights, which is why they had the directors from Gimme Shelter. They'd seen the Woodstock, and they knew that had been filmed, and they wanted to do the same, and they wanted to make money on it and have a cinema release. And that is why they declined a perfectly good location. They were offered a perfectly good location for the free concert, which had like food trucks, it had water supply, it had toilets, it had parking, like huge parking location. It was none of that at Altamont. Altamont was an absolute nightmare of a location. It was a disaster. It was out in sort of, kind of ranch county. And, suddenly you're going to have 150,000 sort of people off their absolute heads on amphetamine and LSD and all the rest of it. In essentially, quote unquote, redneck country. And this was another reason why it was a problem for the Hells Angels. Because initially as well, they'd talked about having it in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, but they'd been declined by the council. Now, if it had been at Golden Gate Park, the Hells Angels, who would have had the jurisdiction there, this is to do with the Angels' structure, they would have been, they were acquainted with the hippies in San Francisco. They sold products to the hippies in San Francisco. They partied with the hippies. They were aware of them. Now, in Altamont, this is out in the country of California, and it's like ranch county. It's in quote-unquote redneck kind of country. And a lot of those angels were from places like Oakland chapter. I think San Bernardino. I might be confused with the names there. They weren't acquainted with the hippies in the same way, and they didn't like hippies. they were just a bit more, back county, as it were. But again, the Rolling Stones didn't care. They wanted just to have a free location where they could put on this show and earn money off the film, basically. And, they didn't really care about the consequences. It was pretty clear what was going to happen, in all honesty. They had a ridiculously low stage. They just had no idea. I mean, they'd had the Hells Angels essentially perform security in Hyde Park, but it was just a completely different ball game. It was a tea party compared to what it was in California. Just the cultural, social background of it. The police were actually in Hyde Park, but they'd essentially agreed to turn a blind eye to cannabis use. And everyone cleared up after themselves, and it was all very polite, and there was barely any arrests whatsoever. And the Hells Angels in London, certainly in 1969, they were just motorcycle hobbyists. So you're comparing Labradors with wolves, in all fairness. No disrespect to the London Hells Angels from that period, but the guys in California, they were the real deal. They were the founding Hells Angels. It was just a different culture. So hopefully that sets the scene a little bit for the forthcoming video. That is basically just a very brief overview of why they chose Altamont. Okay, well, this is on the subject of the Rolling Stones Altamont Festival. And this is information that I have taken from Sam Cutler's autobiography. Sam Cutler He's an interesting enough character. He's quite a grubby character. He's not particularly likeable, I've got to be honest. I've read his autobiography, and yeah, it's a sort of archetypal 1960s spiteful mutant, if you want to call him that. I mean, literally on the first page of his autobiography, he basically tells you that he's not English. He was born... He was adopted. His mother was an Irish gypsy and his father was Jewish, and he doesn't really like the English, even though he was raised in England and he was adopted. His adopted family were dyed-in-the-wool communists, and really, from those beginnings, really tells the tale. And Sam Cutler, as I say, he then got involved in the 1960s, the music scene, and he was the Rolling Stones tour manager from the Hyde Park concert in 1969 onwards, and famously in Altamont. And I remember years ago I watched Gimme Shelter and had it on video, and we used to watch it. And we always quite like Sam Cutler because he's quite sort of sardonic. He's a very dry character, and he's kind of from South London, and he's got that sort of Croydon kind of drawl to him. And he was being sort of really quite sarcastic with the hippies, and it was quite funny, I used to think.
The people that are hanging on that scaffolding, you're rendering that scaffold unsafe by climbing on it. Those scaffoldings are not built to take very heavy weights, so if we could have some sort of reason, whatever that might be, we'd be very pleased.
Arthur?
Having said that, having gone and read his book, I'm not so keen on the guy, in all honesty. He used to like spiking people, which I just think is just such a shitty thing to do. But he's quite proud of the times that he had conversations with policemen who were perfectly nice to him and cheerful and saying, yeah, good work. I like this concert. People seem nice. And he sort of laughs about how he'd sort of slip, LSD into their Coca-Cola. And possibly traumatise the guy and possibly lose the man his job. Like, it's just a bit of a shithead, really. Anyway, getting to the nub of this one is some very interesting information which he goes into about his friend Goldfinger. Nothing to do with James Bond. This is Ken Cornell, who was a notorious big-time sort of coke dealer who was in and around the Grateful Dead. And I mean, anyone who knows too much about the Grateful Dead should be anyway, aware of their CIA connections. And it seems to me that they were a sort of group that they would have had green-lit dealers around them who may have been connected, may have known what's what, or at least been in and around people that did know what's what. The Grateful Dead were slated to play Altamont, and they did the off. In fact, the Grateful Dead were one of the great, instigators of it. And they were the ones that, in that little scene, they were sort of visionaries and everything. And then it came on top and they just left.
Oh, that's what the story is here?
Yeah.
Oh, bummer.
Really, man. I mean, like, it's scary.
Who's doing all the beating?
Hells Angels.
Hells Angels are doing beating on musicians?
Marty got beat up. They've been fighting on the stage.
Doesn't seem right, man.
It's really weird, man. It's really weird.
Oh, man.
There's lots of people.
Really?
They just packed up and left. They saw what was coming. They didn't want to have any part of it, perhaps wisely. But anyway, this is from a conversation that he had with Goldfinger. And I'm just basically going to read it. Regarding the acid and regarding the sort of the quality or lack thereof of the acid that was going around and the motivations perhaps behind that acid being pushed around. So this is just with regarding something that Goldfinger in his book comes up as saying. This is later on. This is well after the event. This is possibly like a year, 2 years after Altamont. But he meets up with him and he recounts his conversation. Now, it's basically on the quality or lack thereof of the acid that was going around. And this guy Goldfinger basically states that he thinks that it was a federal operation and that they were they would deliberately, and there's all sorts of records. And if you read Joel Delvin's book, which is quite in depth about Altamont, there was it was all free. People were walking around just giving people free acid, and it was these yellow LSD trips.
Some people from Berkeley laid a bag with more than 1,000 hits of acid on the Angels, who freely distributed the pills from the SF chapter's bus backstage and in handfuls tossed out from the stage. There was a batch of yellow pills circulating through the crowd that was turning out bad trips by the dozens.
And they were absolutely, they weren't the sort of like, you know, nice colours and see the rainbows kind of thing. This was like bad stuff. This was cut with weird stuff. It was very, very high. And I'll just read the text here. Basically, it's all contained here. So my old friend Goldfinger was also very interested in James and had some strange stuff to tell me. Over lines of coke and Afghan hashish at his Mill Valley home, we spent an evening discussing some of the weirder aspects of Altamont. Ken had been there for the whole day and carefully noted the behaviour of various people, many of whom he suspected to be federal officers. Ken believed that Woodstock had seriously frightened the federal authorities and that they were determined that similar events would not become commonplace. I asked Ken to find out as much as he could for me. After a few weeks, we met up again, and the smuggler told me what he'd learned about James through his extensive connections. John James is a very shady, by the way, just end quote. He's a very shady character in all this. He's basically like a mafia hanger-on and not a very good guy. Apparently, James was well known to the San Francisco office of the FBI, as was Mel Belly, the flamboyant but useless attorney. According to Goldfinger, both men met regularly with FBI officials immediately prior to Altamont. So these two figures were involved in the organization of Altamont. I mean, Belly, I think he wanted it somewhere else. And he's actually, Belly's connected with the Knights of Columbus, which muddies it even further. And he was kind of threatening Cutler. He was saying, if you don't do this, the Knights of Columbus are going to come down on you, and you don't understand how things work in America, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's later in the book. Goldfinger got this information from a secretary in the Belly offices who often scored cocaine from him. Why they were meeting with the FBI, the secretary had no idea, but she was pretty sure it had something to do with the free concert. Goldfinger was absolutely convinced that after Woodstock, the US government became seriously concerned about the possible radicalization of the nation's youth at large pop festivals, and he was sure that the government was determined to stop this happening by any means possible. J. Edgar Hoover, the cross-dressing head of the FBI, was leading the fight to protect the nation's youth from the scourge of the fundamentalist left of the youth movement and the Black Panthers. He saw the whole business of festivals as part of some radical left-wing agenda designed to subvert the healthier interests of the youth of the United States. Well, he was right, to be honest.
Contributions to the Panther Defense Fund. Contributions to the Panther Defense Fund. They're trying to either wipe out the Panther Party by jailing all the members and wiping them out economically, financially, or violently through killing them. After all, they're just Negroes, you know.
But anyway, we continue. Those sections of the various federal law enforcement agencies concerned with the fight against drugs were on Hoover's side, convinced that festivals were set up by drug dealers to facilitate the more efficient distribution of their product. Altamont, coming so soon after Woodstock, was an immediate threat. When they couldn't stop the concert happening, Goldfinger said they decided to use whatever means necessary to discredit the event. It is worth remembering that at the time of Altamont, Richard Nixon was president, and the Attorney General, John Mitchell, was a man who, though sworn to uphold the law, was instead breaking it at virtually every possible opportunity in order to protect Nixon's political interests. I mean, this is just Cutler's communism coming out here again, but whatever. The FBI cooperated in their endeavours with the BNDD, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, the precursor of today's DEA. And according to Goldfinger, it was narcotics agents who had been responsible for the distribution of thousands of tablets of tainted acid at Altamont.
LSD, psilocybin, hashish.
The pills in question were pale yellow and, according to Goldfinger's source, contained some 1,600 micrograms of LSD, almost 7 times the normal, quote, meeting God dose.
Wow, but I want to be smarter, but you're just so far because, yeah!
So these were exceptionally high, dosage LSD. What is interesting here is that Sam Cutler neglects to mention this fact in his autobiography. However, it's in the film Gimme Shelter, and that is that he was told by people multiple times, apparently, this is in Joel Selvin's book, he was told, get on the microphone and tell people to not take this yellow acid. And he refused to do it, and I'll show you the clip now. He refuses to do it on the basis that it would sort of put people on a downer if they'd taken that acid. And the guy says to him, well, this was done at Woodstock, and it was done at Woodstock. I mean, it's a long time since I've seen it, but I remember seeing the Woodstock, the movie film, and they're saying numerous times, don't take the brown acid. It's bad stuff. Cutler refuses to do that. He says, if I say that, there's 150,000 people here, and if I tell them that this is bad stuff and it's going to mess them up and they've taken it 15 minutes ago, that's not going to do anyone any favours. So he neglects to tell people. If you read Joel Selvin's book again, he talks about the medical centre, and they had, I think it's Thorazine. I'm doing this from memory here. Thorazine is the drug that they would inject people with to sort of bring them down. They ran out of that. They had so many people having bad trips. They had these like little tents, they were just supposed to like bring people down if they were having a bad time. But they were absolutely overrun with these people, and they ran out of Thorazine, like literally in the first 3 or 4 hours of the festival unfurling. So Cutler didn't mention that. Could have mentioned it, and he didn't mention it. So, just editing that in.
Well, the guy's freaking out up the tent there, and
Sorry. Tough shit.
What do you mean, tough shit? The guy is really freaking out.
No, actually, I don't mean tough shit. What I mean is that if you lay successive numbers of bummers on this crowd, by the time 6 o'clock comes, man, they are going to be in a real mood. I'm not prepared to stand here laying just bum trips on 150,000
up at Woodstock,
people
this was done, and you were there, and and announcements were made.
Continue. They had been poorly manufactured and may have been contaminated with adulterants. Tablets are as readily identifiable as fingerprints, and a skilled forensic chemist can tell immediately by examining any tablet what kind of machine was used in the manufacturing and processing. But these pills had been pressed in a tabbing machine that no one had ever seen before. Several of the Bay Area chemists had managed to get samples of that batch of bad acid and were adamant that it was not manufactured by any of the California street chemists, all of whom formed a pretty tight little underground cabal. They all agreed that the bad acid given away at Altamont was pressed on a machine of a type that could only be found in the upper reaches of legitimate pharmacological industry. Such a machine would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which was well beyond the reach of the underground chemists. And even if the underground chemists had been able to afford such a machine, the federal anti-drug agencies were monitoring the manufacturers of these machines and would know of anybody who had purchased one. To purchase such a machine would make being busted an absolute certainty. Of course, such a machine would have been readily available to federal agencies if they required it. Goldfinger had been responsible for the distribution of many thousands of trips over the years and scoffed at my suggestion that the bad acid was simply a batch that had been manufactured poorly by some inefficient street chemist. He gave me a rapid rundown of the underground manufacturing process. No one, he insisted, would have released such bad acid onto the street. After a chemist made a bunch of acid, he always checked its purity. Indeed, while manufacturing acid, it was impossible, Goldfinger explained, for the chemist not to get high on his own product. If the product had been tainted, there would have been one very sick chemist. As he also explained, there were some super healthy egos involved in the chemistry side of the drug scene, and they were all competing to produce the purest acid. It was a small scene. The chemists all knew one another and considered themselves members of an elite who were changing the consciousness of the world. None of them would have dreamed of being associated with something so substandard. It would have been bad for their reputation. The arrival of these little yellow hell pills at Altamont, Ken explained, was deliberate. They were hell pills at Altamont high, but to F them up and discredit the counterculture. Goldfinger also told me that the head of the FBI office in San Francisco was at the Altamont Festival and had been in communication with several of the people who worked for James. The feds had a motorhome parked near the Altamont racetrack. Officers had used it as a hangout. Ken said he knew the head of the FBI in San Francisco, so when he said that he had seen him talking quite openly with some of James's people, I had no reason to disbelieve him. When I told Ken that James knew exactly who he was and was freaked out about his hanging out with the Stones, Ken laughed grimly. I mean, it goes on and it just talks more about the mafia connections of James, essentially. But what I do think is interesting there is the whole premise of the feds essentially taking action and giving and basically causing, the bringing down of the curtain of the 1960s, which is what it was. I mean, they'd done the research. I mean, the CIA, they openly did research on LSD, and then they pushed it out and they had it advocated via their sources, in the controlled media, such as the Beatles. They had it advocated.
Millions of dollars would be spent on LSD research at universities throughout the country, and word would begin to spread on campus about this so-called mind-blowing drug. And suddenly, there was the counterculture of the 60s.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
Counter case that I would make in relationship to that is to remember that the people who were doing the research were people who would be doing the research regardless of who was the sponsor. I don't think anybody working in that time in the remotest ever thought that it would blow up into the kind of thing that it did.
This was part of their research and they wanted it off the books. So they thought, well, let's just use it as a distraction. And then 1969 came along. Perhaps they decided we've done enough, or it's getting a bit out of hand. We've had Woodstock. We want to bring it down. And I mean, everyone will tell you that, Altamont was the sort of end of the hippie dream and all the rest of it. So it doesn't take much, does it, really? You just get some really bad acid, and it could have been anything. It could be that 2DP or whatever the really bad stuff is that was doing the rounds at that time. And you can look through Gimme Shelter and you can read Selvin's account and you can read all the accounts that you like. I mean, there were people freaking out at that festival all day, and this is just not just because the Angels, it's just because it was just everyone, but there was just so many people on bad trips. And then you put the Angels in there, the Hells Angels, and laying into anyone. And I mean, half of them were fucking off their head as well.
Oh man, really?
They had wine. Everyone was drinking cheap red wine, and they were passing it around. And all this red wine was spiked. So literally everyone was tripping off their fucking nuts in this hell realm of a concert. Whether they wanted to or not, they were all getting spiked with this wine. Or they were taking it of their own volition. People were just walking around giving them people. Here's some acid. Knock yourself out, So everyone was off their head on these terrible fucking LSD trips, and then you had the Hells Angels and everything else. And, you had the mother of all bad trips for about 100,000 people, and that really did bring the curtain down. Okay, I think it's probably good to tag in a little bit about the killing of Meredith Hunter here. I mean, this is not the primary focus by any means of this video, but it is, you know, it's a key factor of Altamont is his killing. And having now read 2 books on Altamont and watched the film like multiple times when I was younger and again recently, and read wider kind of coverage and wider discussions on it, in all honesty, Meredith Hunter, there is a large degree of he a good boy, he didn't do nothing. And frankly, he did do something. He pointed a gun at the stage. And I mean, in the wake of it, it's claimed that he got 2 shots off. That was what one of the angels was saying. I'm not sure that really comes across on the video. But he certainly was waving a gun around. He was purported to have been saying throughout the concert that he wanted to kill Mick Jagger. I mean, this is just purported. But he was not a particularly savoury individual, and we've got some information on him here. Perhaps this is worth tagging in. So Meredith Hunter was the 3rd of 4 children born to an African-American woman named Altha Mae Anderson and her Native American partner, Curly Hunter. His legal name was Meredith Curly Hunter, but his girlfriend Patty, that's the blonde lady you can see in the footage, called him by his street name Murdoch Supreme. She can be seen in the film Gimme Shelter crying over his corpse. Hunter was a tough guy from the East Bay and was known to carry a weapon. He had a short fuse, and law enforcement authorities knew him as a methamphetamine user and dealer. Meredith Hunter was like the man who killed him, a gang member belonging to a black crew called the East Bay Executioners. The Executioners were deeply involved in the sale of marijuana and methamphetamines and had well-established markets in East Bay's black community. It was also an absolute condition of membership that they remained armed at all times. Most of them used methamphetamines, and the pathologist's examination of Hunter's corpse revealed trace marks on his arms. Both men, the accused and the victim, fitted the description armed and dangerous. One speed dealer got killed by another at a concert, and somehow the Rolling Stones were responsible. This was the muck that was being peddled by the American press at the time. A poor black fellow had been ruthlessly murdered by the Hells Angels, virtually at the behest of the Rolling Stones. Nothing was said about Hunter's past or the fact that he was armed at a concert. Apparently it's quite acceptable in America to attend an outdoor gig carrying a revolver. I mean, it kind of goes on. The guy who killed him, he was found not guilty, and he was argued in self-defense. And in all honesty, you know, you can look at that footage, and it's quite clear the guy was a clear and present threat. He literally pulls a gun out, he points it at the stage, he's waving this pistol around. You know, there's people everywhere. Like, anyone could have been killed. This guy's off his nut, and he's waving a gun around, and they stabbed him. You know, I mean, if a guy is waving his gun around, pointing it at the stage, and, you know, you have to take action. In the heat of the moment, you got to deal with the threat that's in front of you. And I would say Meredith Hunter was a threat to everyone at the concert. Okay, well, it's probably worth tagging this in and be a little bit dubious regarding the source, but it's interesting nonetheless. And this is Cutler's account of a meeting he later had with John James. Now, John James was a very shady, like, mafiosa kind of guy who was a bit of a scumbag and a bit of a con man. And the Cutler recounts of this later meeting when he met him in a restaurant and they had a conversation about Altamont and everything. And Cutler doesn't like him, which is a massive understatement. Cutler, of course, being the man he is, thinks he's incredibly clever to tell the reader how he did spike him in this meeting as well. He went off and he went to the toilet and he said that he put in like 12 doses of very strong LSD in his drinks. I mean, it's the kind of man Sam Cutler seems to have been. But anyway, I'll just read this. I put it to James that his people had left the concert early and were next to useless. James's people were essentially tasked as security, and they were like private security for the Stones. They were basically mafia hangers-on, it seems to be. It was only for the fact that the Angels had intervened that saved someone on stage from being killed. James looked thoughtful for a moment, then he told me the most incredible tale. Meredith Hunter was a patsy, he explained. He was at Altamont to, quote, do someone else's bidding. He claimed that Hunter had been given some unspecified tasks and it had gone all horribly wrong. But James didn't furnish any further details. He warbled on about the San Francisco police and what cordial relations he enjoyed with the department. He claimed the only reason Meredith Hunter had even been on the street was by virtue of the good graces of the local narcotics officers. I didn't believe anything he said. There you go. I mean, I'll just thread that in. I mean, I would probably discount that. The idea that he was in there, you know, I don't buy it. I just think he was just Meredith Hunter, Murdoch Supreme, you know, off his head on drugs and not being able to handle his impulse control. That's what that would be my estimation. Perhaps I'm wrong, but there you go. Okay, there's a few quotes as well here from another book. This is a book by John Potash called Drugs as a Weapons Against Us. Which I read like 50% of, and I wasn't a great fan of, in all honesty. I mean, this book is basically around, you know, the idea that the CIA, you know, uses drugs and drug culture as a means of social engineering and control, which I'm sure listeners to this would agree, and I would agree. However, Potash, he's got his own agenda, and he's basically sort of leftist, essentially. I'm pretty sure he says that his parents are sort of left-wing intellectuals or academics, and I'm slightly dubious about the etymology of the surname Potash, in all honesty, as well. But, you know, fine. Now, I'm just going to read the quotes that he says, and I suppose this lends weight to what James is intimating there, that possibly Meredith Hunter was involved in some sort of, like, conspiracy to murder Jagger. And, you know, Potash kind of, like, leans into the idea that perhaps he was being used by the feds, because the feds wanted to murder Jagger for nefarious political reasons. But anyway, we'll just read the quotes. While most accounts see this incident as part of the Angels' random violence, the film Gimme Shelter appeared to show Pizarro and the other Angels stepping out of line away from the others to thwart what looked like a planned shooting of Mick Jagger and or another Rolling Stone. It showed Hunter holding a gun as if ready to shoot. An autopsy revealed he had methamphetamines in his system at the time. An angel on the stage told Jagger, "You've got to get down. The guy's got a gun out there and he's shooting at the stage." Actually, shooting or not, the gun was large, visible, and was reportedly loaded. What explanation could there be for Meredith Hunter to step on stage with a gun? Got my own idea there. While theories abound, the notion that someone paid Hunter to do this is certainly possible. Those plotting to kill Jagger likely wanted to divide black activists and white activists. A black man shooting Mick Jagger could have helped to drive a wedge between these groups. Then he goes on, Mick Jagger was sued by Meredith Hunter's family and settled for $10,000 in either a bizarre coincidence or purposeful action to warn others about thwarting a planned intelligence murder operation. Some years later, Hell's Angel Alan Pissarro was found dead in the Anderson Reservoir with $10,000 in his pocket. I don't know what he's saying there, really. Is he saying that they placed $10,000 in his pocket? This was some sort of symbolism, like, you know, some sort of... Maybe. This will send the message, don't thwart the CIA in our attempts to murder pop stars. It's just bollocks, and it's just Potash. And it goes on here. Attacks on the Rolling Stones continued after the Altamont Music Fest. The Associated Press reported that a former Hells Angel named Butch was placed in the Witness Protection Program when he testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee. He said the Angels had an open contract to murder Mick Jagger, purportedly for not defending them over the Altamont stabbing. So there you go. That's John Potash. That's John Potash's theory. That it's, what he's intimating there is he's saying, and I suppose you could argue that this kind of, you know, maybe he's read this from James's quotes. I don't know when his book was first published, but James's quote kind of backed that up, I suppose, that he was being used and he was known by the narcotics, and they thought, oh well, we'll use him as a patsy. We'll use this guy as a patsy, and he'll turn up and, you know, on orders he'll shoot Mick Jagger. I don't buy this. I just think he was just he was just what he was, in all honesty. Not a very savoury individual. As stated, he was a member of this gang, and they're supposed to carry guns with them at all time, and he was probably off his head. He was certainly off his head on amphetamines, and no doubt LSD as well, and couldn't handle it. Surrounded by all the violence, and he just fucking spurged out with a gun. I mean, it's not unknown of that demographic, in all honesty. Now, further to that, I mean, how I'd counter this most directly is if you're going on an assassination attempt, and you're going to carry out a hit on someone on the stage in a pop concert, and you've got a gun, would you be dressed in a bright lime green suit? It seems slightly incongruous to me. If someone had tasked me with murdering a pop star on the side of a stage, I'd probably wear like a brown polo shirt and maybe a black coat or something. But this guy, you can spot him numerous times in the film because he's got this fucking great bright lime green kind of pimp suit. So I don't know, maybe forward planning wasn't his forte, but it would just seem quite basic to me. He's hardly gone there dressed down, is he, for the occasion of carrying out an assassination? So I don't really buy this, but maybe it's worth putting out there. You can tell me in the comments. Interesting concept. Ultimately, I don't buy it. So by way of conclusion, I would state that the whole Altamont thing was driven in large part by the Rolling Stones' greed, naivety of certain planners that were kind of on the periphery of it. You could probably argue with some degree of validity that there were bad actors involved, certainly in the likes of John James, possibly in the likes of Mel Belly, the lawyer, both of whom allegedly have had connections within the FBI. Certainly John James was a criminal. But I'm not sure this went much beyond just typical sort of showbiz, organised crime kind of activities, really. I would discount, by the way, it's probably worth mentioning as well, because I actually did a video pertaining to this, and then it has transpired to have been false information, which is quite disappointing. And that is from Dave McGowan's book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And this is disappointing because I like that book, but I mean, he's got some sloppy research in there, and he's just got some out and out inaccuracies in there. And one of those was his claim that George Lucas was manning the camera that captured the Meredith Hunter stabbing, and that is just absolutely not true. It was not George Lucas at all. This is from court records, and this is from the Joel Selvin book, and he quotes court records and he quotes witness statuses. This is a guy called Baird someone or other. I've got it on my screen currently. But George Lucas was there, and George Lucas was manning this camera, which was quite a sophisticated bit of kit, but it was up on the hillside. And the guys that actually captured that footage were, they were down by the stage. And Lucas actually had a technical problem on the day with the camera that he was using, this big sort of like long distance bit of kit, and he ended up actually going home early. So it's completely inaccurate in the book there. Yeah, as I say, I made a video on it. I thought, okay, this is a good little thing to throw in at the end, but it's not true. Which does lead me to speculate on what else is not true in McGowan's book, but there you go. So in conclusion, yeah, I mean, the angels are the angels. I mean, they're not really best suited for this kind of role, are they? I mean, it's just foolish. I mean, I don't think it was planned, the idea that, well, we'll get the angels in and they'll start kicking the shit out of people. I really don't. I think it was just, as I say, it was more about greed. They paid them $500 worth of beer. I mean, it was just about money. It was about money, and they wanted to rebrand and have this cool kind of counterculture kind of vibe, and they thought the angels would look good on the video, and it's just avarice and lack of care, basically, more than anything else. So there you go. That's basically all the points I can think of mentioning at this stage. So you've got to the end. Hats off. It's been a bit of a mess, this one. Keep on adding stuff to it here and there. It was supposed to be just a relatively short one, but these videos will be going on the new channel now, so if you subscribe to my old channel, be sure to subscribe to the new one, because I want to keep these separate and want to do more sort of countercultural stuff. This will all go on the new channel. So if you can subscribe to that, that would help. If you can do all the things that help with the algorithm, if you've enjoyed it, you can maybe spam it on social media. That would be nice. Keep an eye out for new ones coming up in the near future.